It is the year of our Lord 2017. A darkness has fallen across the land. A darkness that is Castlevania, original series on Netflix. Join your two wayward hosts of the Say Report as they discuss the 4 episodes that are either not enough or just right. First, introducing Sejon Seroika.
And that's Devin Decker. I don't know where to go from here. I had no idea that we were going to do this, and then we did this.
To be honest with you, I took a breath, I counted to 5, and I hit record, and then I let just whatever was in my mind come out.
Isn't that how we do the show every week, though? Really?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Lost. Jack's Method. That's the Saber brought to you by Jack's Method.
So we checked out Castlevania this week. We should definitely talk about that. But first, I wanted to tell you what I did this morning after I watched that.
Oh, please tell me then.
I went to go check out Spider-Man Homecoming today, and I just wanted to talk quickly about it. I mean, it is only opening weekend, so I don't want to get too deep into it. Let people see it first. But I enjoyed myself. Have you seen it yet, Devin?
I saw it on Thursday night. It was a 10:15 show, and I got to tell you, the 10:15 show of Spider-Man Homecoming, or really any Marvel movie, I haven't seen this with any other film, but I have seen a lot of the Marvel movies at 10 o'clock. Those are your real diehard fans.
Yeah. Because they're not the ones trying to get right out there right away at 7 o'clock, and they're not the ones that are waiting till like tomorrow to see it. These are the ones that really, really, really want to get this movie and enjoy it with a group of people that really want to get this movie.
Yeah, we were at work, or we there's a reason why we couldn't be at the 7 o'clock, but we need to see it tonight.
We need to see it tonight. Right.
So those are the people that we have a good conversation with. So yes, I have seen it, and I agree with you that it was very, very enjoyable. And it's so weird. It's like the most indie music kid syndrome reasons why I don't like it.
No. I think a lot of people have been feeling this way about seeing it, is that they enjoy it, but there's something that they're hesitant about with it. And I think it's just, honestly, I think what it is that we've got enough Marvel movies now that we can look back and see a kind of a pattern with some of them, and some of them really fall into what you can consider, I think, a stopgap territory, especially now that we get 2 or 3 Marvel movies a year, right? Like, you get these ones that are good, well enough that they definitely keep you interested in the universe, keep you informed about what's going on, but they're just not the big emotional punches, right? And I do feel like they went for a really big emotional punch with Guardians 2, Volume 2 earlier this year. I think that was the one that they kind of went all out on. And then don't forget that soon we're going to have Thor Ragnarok, right? I think
I'm excited
those
about
2 films, they were just looking for a really good like holdover movie, and that's definitely what this feels like. It feels just like a really well-made, really enjoyable holdover film to just kind of keep you in the universe for the time being.
And in addition to that, because you're 100% right, this is one of those, like, in any other universe, it would be like, all right, we have to make a movie in order to hold on to the franchise. Why not Jeremy Renner as Jason Bourne this time? There's also this part about this Spider-Man film that felt like it was made just for me.
Yeah.
Like references and characters and beats and moments were
I will give one moment away that just blew me away. I sat there thinking, man, this feels very Ferris Buellery, and then they very much lean into that for a second, and I was just like, yes! It was almost like within 2 seconds of me thinking that, they definitely make the reference, and I was just like, oh my god, that was amazing. But yeah, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It's like it felt very much catered to me. And in that same way, because I ended up seeing it with Dale and some of her friends, so like I was with a large group, I got to have that big group discussion that I haven't had. I've had it actually after every superhero film that I've seen this year, ironically enough. Like I think about it and I'm like, I haven't had that moment where we go to Denny's after the movie and like really tear into it since maybe 2007 with Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of the one that was like, we don't need to talk about these anymore. This was fun. Thanks, guys. But like I got to have that discussion with those people, and I was also talking with people in the audience because like we're in line waiting for the movie to start, and we're talking, so I'm gauging and seeing where everybody is, where it comes to Spider-Man as a character and the the MCU as a whole. So it was like this real moment, but then it also kind of I was like kind of upset that I had to share that film with so many other people.
Oh God. Someday you're gonna have to address your white male privilege, and
Oh,
it's gonna be a day for crying.
I just
Um,
100%. I blame it on like my indie music syndrome. Is like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
because that movie was like the most Spider-Man of every Spider-Man film.
yeah. Definitely.
Without question, Spider-Man: Homecoming is the most Spider-Man movie. And then I'm like, hearing people react to references that like, it's sort of how I felt with Baby Driver, where like I was in on almost every reference.
Yeah.
And there's a big reveal in the movie, and I will not give away that big reveal because apparently it was a huge reveal. But I leaned over to Dale and said, what's gonna happen," and she's like, "Yeah, no, duh, shut up." And then it occurred, and like there were people in the audience who were like, "Oh my god!"
I got to tell you, I was definitely one of those people. If we're talking about the same twist, I didn't realize that was what was going to happen, and I was very pleased that I didn't realize. Like it happened, and I was like, oh, I didn't even pick up on that, and I love it. Like anyway,
It was
so I was one of those dopes.
the perfect part about that twist was so Dale and I like literally had that moment where like we both know exactly what's about to happen. High five, Monster Twins for life, or whatever. And then that occurs, and there's like a solid beat after all the oh my gods and the rumbling through the audience. And Dale lost her shit, could not contain herself. She's
That's
just like,
awesome.
that was amazing. Like, people, oh my God. So
Hmm.
thank you for being one of those people who was surprised in that moment and really loved it.
Yeah.
And again, it just felt so informed by so much Spider-Man that I have like consumed in my lifetime. I am a huge advocate of Spectacular Spider-Man from 2008 2009. It is the greatest Spider-Man cartoon out there. It sucks that it was only 2 seasons long. It's Greg Weisman from Gargoyles, and like a lot of the moments in this film, because that was the most Spider-Man in high school as a teenager of the adaptations. So like of course it felt like it was right in that wheelhouse, and especially when you have someone like the villains that end up showing up in the movie, like Phineas Mason is there, and I'm not going to tell you who Phineas Mason is, right? Because I think they only refer to him by his last name one time in the entire film. But
Right.
I see Phineas Mason, and I'm like, oh my god! And I'm so excited because what an obscure character to put into the film, but like based upon the word they're building, exactly who that film needed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the other big thing about this one is it's the movie that brings Spider-Man into the MCU, and I think no matter what, it succeeded in doing that beautifully.
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, from moment one of the prologue, which I love that Marvel movies are allowed to have prologues. And I know
Yeah.
that I love that movies tried to do that a little bit. Like The Wedding Ringer tried to be a prologue film. Like we're gonna have a little scene before we show you who made this movie.
Yeah,
But
before the what do you call it? The studio
the
slides come
studio
up, right?
slides, exactly. But really, Marvel is the only ones who like they have it down. They should be the ones who are allowed to do it anymore because they're fantastic
Hmm.
and they've just
Yeah.
nailed
But
it.
we
They
should talk
know.
more. We should give people a chance to see it before we talk too much about it because I do think that we should definitely talk about some Spider-Mans at some point. Um, Possibly even all the Spider-Mans at one point, but we'll talk more about that later off mic, Devin.
Oh, that what a great
Um,
preview.
so
Pep, pep,
yeah,
pep,
so
pep.
we what else did you do this week, man?
What else did I do this week? Well, it was 4th of July, right? So I got to spend
Oh,
a whole day doing nothing, which was exciting.
yeah.
I played a bunch of board games on my 4th of July. First of all, I got out of Rhode Island, like I said I would, because Bristol Parade. In fact, the night before when I went to pick up our takeout for the family, the guys were like, "Oh, so what are your plans for 4th of July?" And I'm like, "I'm getting the hell out of Rhode Island."
Bye. See ya.
And he laughed out loud, and I'm like, yeah, because it's like we take it too seriously in this state, which is great, right? Because it's independence and it's something that like is sort of the cornerstone of our entire like country. But that we take it too far in Rhode Island. I will admit that. So I went and we played board games. I played a bunch of Zelda. I beat 2 seeds of Zelda while I was waiting for like food and stuff to cook. It was a good day. And then I saw Spider Man. So there's that. Also, Sejan, we started our streaming aggregate channel on Twitch, Lost Soul Limit. So we had
Yeah.
that going. This was a good week overall in the entire
Was
pantheon of devonology.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You played you started us off this week. Were you Monday? Who
No,
was Monday night?
Jeff Hibbert was Monday. He played Doom, which is
Mm.
fitting considering what the name of the channel is. And then Dale Decker, she played Jaws because it was Independence Day, and she's like, well, that takes place around July 4th weekend.
Fantastic, fantastic reasoning.
And then you brought us in
And
with,
then I was Wednesday night.
yeah,
And Wednesday night was a weird night of me playing some weird games.
people loved watching The Witness, though. I loved watching The Witness. I never knew that
Yeah,
that's what that was. It was excellent.
yeah. So I played about an hour of that, but before that, I played a Bit Trip Runner and talked about my love of the Bit Trip games, and started like naming characters and how to get away from a Nazi octopus, and I was being chased by a drunken pickle. It was a weird night.
That sounds like a weird Wednesday night. And then on Thursday was the first day that I got to stream on the channel, and I played Spider-Man the arcade game, which I don't know if you ever went to Roller Magic or because you're from EP, you were always United States of America.
United Skates all the way, man. United Skates.
Oh man, there's a movie, right? There's a movie you set in Rhode Island in the 90s, and you have the United States of America team versus the Roller Magic crew, and it's like gang war violence.
Oh, we
but
call
all
it Solar
set
Babies 2. Roller skaters for life.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Roll bounce. Oh, gee, it's so good. It's just, but like at Roller Magic, they had this arcade machine, and my childhood basically playing through the Spider-Man arcade game because I wanted to get as amped up as possible for Spider-Man Homecoming. So I
Nice,
put myself
very nice.
in that perfect zone by beating the game 3 times and discussing Spider-Man lore and all the stuff that like I know and I conjecture about what the film would be. Totally called that moment anyway in that stream as well. So it was a good time. There's just all over. This has been a very good week. So I'm excited. And then Friday comes the Castlevania series, which if it had been available when I got home from the movie theater at 2 in the morning, I definitely would have watched it then. But instead, it had to wait until Friday around noontime when I watched on lunch.
Yeah, I was gonna say when does Netflix actually put their stuff up and stuff like that?
I want to say midnight Pacific time. That seems like
okay.
that seems like the safest thing to say. Like
Yeah.
I used to feel. I feel like that's how it always goes with big releases like that because they don't want anyone to have it early, but they don't want to release before the release day. I think that makes sense, right? Like they don't want to release at 12 o'clock on Eastern time, and then like people in California, well, I got it at 9 p.m. the day before it was supposed to come out. Go me! But it'd be crazy with digital stuff to like try to stagger the release for midnight each time. Like what a strain on the servers to like do that. Because then people would be trying to get around it, and
Yeah. Well, and the real reason I asked this was more because last week, anybody paying attention, they took down the first 6 seasons, or the first 5 seasons in the movies of Futurama. And, Futurama on Netflix was a pretty big deal for me. I am part of the subreddit of people that fall asleep watching Futurama. So, like, I have watched a ton, a metric fuck ton of Futurama on Netflix. And so they said they were bringing it down. I actually sat down and put the movies on and let season 6 of that show go because I was just like, I'm going to watch it until they take it down on me. I'm going to watch it until they will not let me watch it anymore. And then it got to be about 3 o'clock in the morning and they still hadn't taken anything down. So I was just like, are they not? And then I started like having these weird like conspiracy thoughts about like maybe it was all a setup and now maybe they got like last minute contracts taken care of. But no, lo and behold, I fell asleep and woke up the next day and it was gone. So I was curious when Netflix actually does this sort of stuff.
Well, because I'm crazy, there was a bunch of movies I wanted to watch once on Netflix, and they were all coming down the next day. So I stayed up and watched those movies, knowing, like, using 3 a.m. as my cutoff time for them. And I started Face Off at 2:50 a.m., knowing it was supposed to be gone. And there is a little glitch in their system where if something is streaming before the cutoff time, it continues to stream. But you can't go back. You cannot stop it. You are at the whim and will of that streaming thing. Because if you touch it at all, if you make it known, then it just ceases to exist.
Yeah, so there must be like a mark when you first hit play that counts as a play for them, and then they just let it go, right? So as long as you started before that time. So
Yeah.
anyway, so this leads to Castlevania coming out on Friday at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and you were able to get to it on Friday, yeah?
Yeah, Friday morning, I started it, watched the first episode, loved that first episode, so I like immediately devoured the next ones. And
Mm-hmm.
after three, I gotta say, like a little bit of fatigue came in, but we'll get to that a little bit deeper once we dive into the show. And then someone asked me how many episodes is it, and like I never look ahead on Netflix because I feel like if you look ahead, you're probably gonna have a spoiler if you like look at
Right.
the episode
Yeah, no,
counts.
I hate looking at the episode counts because because they don't have really good discretion in what's in their descriptions. It's kind of really up to whoever is sitting down at the computer at that moment to write that description. And so there's been some really big spoilers on like Arrow and Flash for me just because I wanted to see how many episodes were left in the season.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, but this person asked, and honestly, I was kind of curious too, as we'll see. And I saw that it was only 4 episodes long. So I said goodbye, and I went and I watched that last episode, which was the second best of the foursome.
Oh, yeah, man, the reveal at the end of what that was leading to. Okay, so we got to get into this.
Yeah,
We got to
let's
talk
get into
about
it.
this.
Yeah. So that's it. That's how
First and
Castlevania happened.
foremost, I have to say, episode 1, fantastic episode. I
Yes.
think it was really brave to make that the first episode of the 4.
Well, you know what? Not brave, honestly. Well, yes. You know, I think I understand why you're saying it's brave because watching that episode, I was convinced up until the last minute that that was going to be the story of this show.
Exactly. It spends 20 minutes of its 25 being all about the story of Vlad Dracula and his wife.
Lisa. And that is the story that I wanted to hear. Like
I
I'm
honestly
like,
thought we were going to get an animated Dracula Untold.
that's what
That's
all I
what I
was
thought.
thinking. All I was thinking. He said it. I thought it. We're crazy.
I was so excited. But no, we got something better instead, actually.
We got something better, but
But
unfortunately,
yeah, so like it felt like it was a really interesting choice for a first episode to me because like you're saying, like it felt like, oh, this is what this show is going to be. How interesting. And then it cuts to all those years later or a year later, right? And it cuts to this guy that we find out is Belmont, Trevor Belmont, in a pub, and it's like, no, this is what the story actually is. What you just watched for the last 20-25 minutes was prologue. And it's just like, oh my god, like this entire episode was just set up just for what the actual story of this show is. Out of 4 episodes, dedicating the entire first one to just that was insane to me. Because, I mean, what it shows is like any other show in the world is made or lives and dies by its pilot, right? But as we've talked about time and time again on this show, like Netflix doesn't play by the rules anymore. So the fact that Netflix was like, no, we're releasing 4 episodes, we can dedicate the entire first episode to just being prologue story, just exposition. Like, let's just do it because the 4 are going to get out there no matter what, right? And it was just like, oh my god, like just one of those things that I don't think anybody but Netflix could have gotten away with.
I also unfortunately feel like all of the budget went into the first episode.
You think?
I just so the second that we meet Trevor Belmont at the end of the first episode, it was jarring to me because like it was a very gothic story, and then suddenly you're with these idiots who like all I could think of were the two guys at the beginning of Malabana. I don't know if that film touched you as deeply as it touched me. But those two guys talking about, I fuck 3 times a day, so that's like a million fucks. Like those two guys talking about the guy they found having sex with their goats. Like I was like immediately like, this is weird. And like the language they were using didn't feel the same like colloquially as what was being used before. So it was really like, oh cool, we're gonna shift from fourth to first right now. Don't worry about your engine being in front of your car. That's what we want to have happen.
Yeah, well, I think it's jarring. I think it's as jarring as you're saying, but I do think it's purposeful. And part of the reason that I think that is the writer behind this, the writer I think that wrote all 4 episodes is Warren Ellis, who is this fantastic comic and novel writer that I love. One of his books, actually, Crooked Little Vein, is one of my favorite books of all time that I like reread from time to time. I think about 3 or 4 times I've read through that book now. And Warren Ellis does this a lot in like Transmetropolitan and stuff. Is he takes things that you're kind of familiar and comfortable with, say, like so the genre of gothic horror, right? But then what he does is he adds a very modern, vulgar twist always to that story. And so in this, it's the introduction of Trevor Belmont, and he's this drunken pub fighter. That's not what you think of for that time period or that character, but it actually works really well, I think, by the time you get to the end of that series.
Yes, I can't disagree with that because you're right. It does work, but when it first happens, I'm just like, oh God,
Yeah.
no. But then,
Hmm.
like, you have, like I said, the first and fourth episodes are my favorite. If I had to rank them, it would be 1, 4, probably 2, 3.
Okay.
Just because, and only 2 because there's one moment in 2. I think it's in 2. It might be in 3. I don't even remember, unfortunately, because it all blends together.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
the moment where he throws the axe, and it is so Castlevania when he does that.
Oh, I believe that's 3 because
Okay,
that's
so
the
yeah,
attack on the town when he
yeah.
just goes ape shit on everybody,
So
right?
1, 4,
And he
3, 2.
he takes out the two guys with arrows, right, with the whip. Like he whips one, and that causes the guy to shoot the other guy with the arrow.
He
And
throws
I
a
was like, oh, that
spear
was a
at
total video
one.
game moment. That was
Like,
beautiful. I
yeah, it's
love that,
great.
right? Like
Yeah,
there
it's
was a lot of
awesome.
moments like that. So I think you're thinking about 3
Yeah,
with the assault on the town.
yeah. The assault on the
Um,
town really.
yeah, like I think you're right. I think that 1 by far is like kind of the most intriguing to me, interesting because it is the first episode. So I think it just wins by default in that way. Like it ends up being kind of the best episode out of the 4 so far because just by its nature of I just didn't know what to expect when I sat down for it. And 4 is amazing because of the reveal at the end of 4. What this is all leading to is Trevor Belmont meets up with the Seekers, and that's actually part of the reason why I really like 2 a lot because 2 is the one where you kind of get into the legend of the Seekers, right? And the whole
Speakers.
like going down into the and it ends with him going down to the Cyclops, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, and that's 100% true. And I believe he fights the Cyclops at the end of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, so it's this. So for me, I really like 2 because the story stuff that's going on in there. And again, it's Warren Ellis kind of at his best, like taking this old creature, like this storyline that like we're somewhat familiar with, right? Like there's this monster that we recognize, this hero figure that we recognize as a hero, but then also adding his like really violent twist to it, of like the way that he just destroys that thing and like the way that he turns the whip and sword into basically this like this flail was amazing. That move was so amazing.
Yeah. It is speakers. They're speakers because they speak the history, not seekers.
Seekers. Sorry, I was thinking Harry Potterish. No,
Speakers.
speakers. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, right, and they speak, and the fact is that the oral history they never write anything down is actually like a huge part of their thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I just love that whole backstory for them and like why they're there and why they don't leave this town, and then of course him the begrudging hero, right? Like he goes on this mission to save this child that he thinks is like a helpless child, and then he shows up and it turns out that she's actually pretty badass too.
Yeah. And it's great, and that's fantastic, and it's also that Sifa Belnades. I mean, this film is based on Castlevania 3: Dracula's Curse from the NES,
Right.
like without question,
Oh yeah.
because the foursome in that is you have Trevor Belmont, you have Alucard, you have Sifa Belnades, who would eventually marry Trevor Belmont. I don't know if they're gonna go that way in the show, but it happens in the game because she is the grandmother of Simon Belmont, and then you have Grant Dynasty, which is honestly one of the big things that sticks in my craw is that we haven't seen anything from Grant yet.
Yeah.
And again, it's only been 4 episodes, but when the end where they're like, "All right, the team's all here," and I'm like, "Well, the team's not all there yet. Please tell me that
What?
he's gonna happen."
Okay, well, and let's spoil this a little bit because anybody that's listening to this is, like they're not gonna die if we talk a little bit about this. But what does he bring to the team that the 3 of them don't already have? Like, what is the big thing with him? Why do we need him as the 4th?
Well, he's kind of like the everyman in a lot of ways, and he's sort of Trevor's connection to humanity, which is odd because like you're with Sufa and Alucard, who are both crazy magical beings.
Superpowers. I
Yeah,
mean, they're the super beings, right?
yeah. So he is another he's just another guy, and he is an unsavory as well. Like he's a thief, he's a former pirate, and he was corrupted by Dracula. In the game, he's the first one that you meet who can help you on your journey. So like,
Okay, so here's where I think things are going, right? One of the other big things about this particular version of Castlevania is that it is very, very heavily anime based, like influenced and also like diving in its own way into the anime genre, right? And so like there's a lot going on in these 4 episodes that while they're really awesome references to Castlevania and really good like Warren Ellis stuff, there's also a lot of really good anime style stuff going on in this, including the fact that what they have formed is your typical starting anime team. You've got your three. You've got your two guys and your girl. First of all, that's like almost everyone. Like look at Samurai Champloo, even like early One Piece and things like that. What you have is you have your kind of your goofy lead that gets himself into trouble all the time, but is more than well equipped to get out of it. Right? You have your swordsman who is like usually quiet, usually got a really dark past, and he's mysterious and you don't know much about him, and like there's like an edge to him that like at first it's hard for the team to accept him, but eventually they realize how much he is loyal to them, right? And that's going to be Alucard through and through. And then finally you have your female lead who's usually like the magician healer, which is totally what they set up. So what you see at the end of the series is you see your typical anime team, right? And then the very next character that you always end up meeting in these movies, in these shows and in these movies, is that guy that they can't quite trust because they've already formed the team. And it's the guy that kind of has to work his way into the family, but they learn by the end that he is totally part of the family. And I think that that's what you're going to see with this everyman character. There's going to be a lot of stuff about how like they're not quite sure if they can trust him. They're not sure what he brings to the team. But at the end of the day, all three of them are going to realize how important he is. You even see it in like Lupin the Third, right? Like there's you end up with a 4-person team eventually as well there, right? Like you always need that everyman character, but that everyman character always seems to be introduced late in the game, or they get introduced early, but they don't accept him until late in the game. And so I'm actually not surprised that they don't have him in the story yet, because I bet you that's what the entire next arc of the movie of the show is going to be, is them coming up against him, and then like 2 or 3 episodes of them taking him in and finally realizing they can trust him by the end of it.
And based upon what happens in the game, he's the boss of the second level, the clock tower. And then in defeating him, his demon form is shed because he was corrupted by Dracula. And then he's like, "Yeah, I want my revenge on this guy. I'm coming with you."
And there you go.
But since he's usually the first one, but like you said, they are building that very tropey group of characters. Since Alucard is there and Sifa, they can both cast their aspersions on someone who was once a servant of Dracula and bring something to the table as to why they can't trust him.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
And then Trevor's just got the whole thing that Trevor just doesn't trust anybody, right? Like that's his entire character, is that he's the lone wolf that somehow has found himself leading a pack.
Oh, dude, even better if him and Grant have some sort of shared history because he's this tavern fighter and Grant is a thief.
Yeah. So if they've like come across each other at some point or something like that, yeah, definitely.
And that's why 4 episodes just wasn't enough for me.
Yeah, so here we go. Final conclusion here, right? Like 4 episodes, man, like it totally I could have sat through another 9 episodes of this show. I would have been totally happy with a 13 episode season. So like why do you think they went with 4?
Well, to be fair, I did a lot of research after watching the series, and the first thing is currently on the draft. It's probably been updated by now. I certainly hope it's been updated by now. But as of Friday, on the Wikipedia page for Dracula's Curse, there was in other media. Project 51 is supposed to be doing a animated adaptation of the story of Dracula's Curse. However, it appears to have been put on permanent hiatus. Project 51 worked on this series. So this is that thing that they were alluding to. And I think initially it was just going to be a movie. And then Netflix came along and they're like, no, you can spread this out. You can stretch this out. But they're like, all right, but we're prepared right now to do 90 minutes of animation. So that's all they could produce for this beginning series.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too as I was watching it. Because I ended up watching all 4 right in a row, like no nonstop. Put it on at about 7:30 this morning. Didn't get off my couch till 9, right? And like the entire time I was just like, I don't know why they separated this. Like as somebody watching Netflix, which means that it's skipping all of the intro stuff. It's going right into the story. I'm not bothering with credits because I can just hit the X button and just go right to the next episode. So like I was just jumping through episodes and I was just like, this is just a film. There's no stopping this, right? And like I get the same impression that this felt like this was just a movie they intended to make, maybe even possibly just a straight to DVD movie, which would have been a shame. Because I think it would have gotten lost in the shuffle if that was the case. Like a lot of those like Resident Evil ones that have been coming out lately that nobody's been paying attention to.
And
Or the
those are
Final
done
Fantasy ones they seem to put out every other year.
and those are done by companies that like still have some good cachet, right?
Hmm.
Konami is hated right now. I
Yeah.
mean, fuck Konami, right? I'm gonna say it. They're a terrible company. So like, even though this is excellent, and this is based purely on the franchise of Castlevania, you're able to distance it from its parent company. If it had been straight to DVD, even with all the fans in the world being like, "Hey, this came out," it would not have gotten seen, and that would have been a tragedy because it's
Hmm.
fantastic.
It is. It really is fantastic, and I recommend it even for people that aren't into the game. I've got a friend of ours, Kevin, who's listening right now. Who I told him I was like, you got to check this out, and he's like, I've never played a Castlevania game in my life, and I was like, that does not matter. Like, that's not the point of this series at all. Like, obviously, at the end of the day, it's to sell games, right? Like, that's why you make a Castlevania movie is to sell Castlevania games. But at the other end of the day. Sorry, I lost you. You got to realize that it's not being geared towards just fans. Like this is being made in a way, like I said, they brought on Warren Ellis to write it, so they clearly care about it actually having like a decent story that links to people outside of the game mythology, and they produced it in a way that it's one of the most gorgeous and well-made animes I've seen in a while. Um, it's one of the most comprehensible animes I've seen in a while too. A lot of the stuff that has been coming out lately on Netflix, like they just released like a Little Witch Academia. They've been pushing for things like Glitter Force and things like that over the last couple of years. They've put some really weird stuff on Netflix that is like fun to watch, but there's just not a depth to it. That's not the case with this. Castlevania is one of the first Netflix animes that I've seen that has a real good depth to it that I'm super excited for them to explore more of. I think they went all out on this thing, and I'm super happy because, man, like video game adaptations rarely get this kind of credence.
And honestly, if it were just a video game adaptation, I don't think I would have called you on Friday and said you need to watch it because we're going to talk about it on the show.
Yeah.
There is this other element to the show, and that's what speaks to me, and that is the fact that the Church of Wallachia, where this is all taking place, is this corrupt, almost governmental agency, and that is so compelling to me, like to see that in like a 1400s set show. I love
Hmm.
that, and
Yeah.
especially because I was playing the cast. I took a vacation a couple of weeks ago, and I played through a bunch of Castlevania games,
Yeah.
completely unrelated to the fact that this show was coming out. I didn't know this show was coming out until I got back and told someone, "Yeah, I've been playing through Castlevania games," and they're like, "Oh, and ready to get ready for the show?" And I'm like, no. What are you talking about, show?"
Well, yeah, in true Netflix fashion, they've kind of not really been out in front of this thing. I feel like they do that with a lot of their stuff, and it's a shame that they don't really get out there and just like push some of their stuff in the way that they could. Because I knew about this. I won't say that I'd never heard of this before, but I honestly didn't think about it until you texted me on Friday, and I was like, oh, that was out today. I didn't even realize it. So yeah, that's why I sat down and watched it this weekend. Was only because you told me about it.
And I mean, and the reason why they don't do that push is because that's like precious more dollars that can go towards the production.
Yeah,
Because
that's
I
true.
feel like
Yeah, yeah.
I put out that the Castlevania is out there. Go watch it now. Because 3 minutes in, I was in tears because probably of Dracula Untold and it touching my heartstrings. I'll be honest, but I put 3 minutes in and I'm out of tears. And then people are like, "Wait, Castlevania is out?" And I just had all these people contacting me, being like, "I didn't know it was out. Where's the information?" So like they really do rely on that grassroots marketing.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I just had a thought, but I'm totally going to rewatch this. I already know I am. So maybe what I'll do is I'll set up a time to live tweet it. I'll rewatch all four of them in a row again, and I'll live tweet the entire thing.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Let's talk about it. Let's let the Say Report Nation know that, and
Yeah,
let's do it. And let's have a good time with it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the corruption of the church, and so when I was playing through those Castlevania games, and as I was cleaning up my hotel room, I opened up a drawer to make sure I hadn't left anything in there, and I was greeted with Gideon's Bible, right?
Of course.
And I look at Gideon's Bible, and I'm like, huh, why would this stop a vampire? What is that? And then I'm like, the hubris of the Catholic Church and of Christians to put into the stories of vampires and like supernatural things that their word, because it comes from God, would actually work against these creatures. Like, it's so insane to me, right? Because
Hmm.
like Dracula doesn't give a damn about your god. He's Dracula. He's basically a god himself. So why would a cross or holy water bother him?
Yeah, and it's the stories of this stuff that delve into that and actually make a point to address that sort of stuff that are the most interesting, the most intriguing, and honestly the ones that stand the test of time, right? Like it's the ones that ignore that are usually forgotten about for just being shallow. And this is a perfect example of them like addressing that sort of stuff.
And I loved it because I'm like, I was just talking about this because the church is just as corrupt as Dracula you see in the very first episode.
Oh, I mean, that's the whole point of the backstory, right? Is at the end of the day, it's the Catholic Church that's responsible for the whole thing, right?
Exactly that. But then there's also the part later on where he like Trevor finds a priest and he's like start blessing water, and then it actually works, and he's like, oh, okay, cool. I
Yeah.
didn't know. Honestly, I didn't
Right,
know.
right. So there's this weird depth to it that again, this comes back to the idea that they put some time and care into the story and stuff. But there's this actual depth to it where it's not that that stuff is fake. It's that a lot of the men that proclaim to practice it are fakers. So that's where this all comes into play. Is not that the stuff is made up, but the way that man corrupts it, it makes it meaningless, which is a huge part of the story and a huge part of the Castlevania lore, really. If you think about like the lore over the years of the way that it's never been about the idea of good versus evil as like as specific beings, but the idea of good versus evil inside every person, right? Like it's this like the whole point of Alucard and the Belmonts is the idea that like these are men that were capable of doing so much more evil but chose to use their powers for good, whereas Dracula is on the other end of that scale, right? But that doesn't even necessarily mean that neither of them is doing the wrong thing. It took the complexity that's actually in the Castlevania lore, but like buried because it's a video game. It took it and put it on full display, and I think that's where this show really succeeded for me as a fan. Is that it took stuff in the Castlevania series that was already there, but really kind of highlighted what I consider to be like the impressive stuff about it.
You think of Castlevania, I think of Castlevania anyway, and there is one quote that always jumps to the foreground for me. And that is, for evil to succeed, it just requires that good men do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like 100%.
Which is at the forefront of the
Like
series.
that's what this show is.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and because you see it, because you see Trevor when you first meet him, and he is just like, I'm so done with this. No one wants me to use my powers. They all just want to, trot on me. We've been excommunicated from the church, which is a whole other new level of it, which I
Yeah.
love because Dracula's curse, the actual lore, it says in the freaking instruction manual, the Pope begged Trevor Belmont to go and confront Dracula. The Pope begged him. So to take an organization that was like totally behind the Belmonts in the games and make them another faction that they're fighting against is excellent.
Well, right. And then the important thing is adding that level of complexity where they're not fighting against the church writ large. They're just fighting against these evil men within the church who are abusing their power there. Because, like you said, you do have the Catholic priest that ends up actually being able to save them in that moment in the episode. So it's not this entire thing where the church is evil. It's this entire thing where there are evil men within the church, which is an important distinction that you don't normally get in a video game story, right? And that's something that we always talk about is the idea that like there's not a depth or a complexity to this, except there is now, right? Like we've introduced one, and it is really really cool. I really really enjoy it.
Good. So the Say Report, Castlevania Netflix series gets the Say Report stamp of approval. Go out and watch it. And if we do end up doing a live tweet of it, we will let you know so that you can be there and you can be a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you have anything else?
So speaking of Konami,
okay. Speaking of Konami,
I not that they have much to do with this, but I've been getting into some Resident Evil lately.
go on.
How deep into Resident Evil have you ever gotten, Devin? Like, is it a big series for you, or is it just something that you're just kind of just culturally aware of?
I'm aware of Resident Evil because I live in the world.
Right.
It was Christmas. I'm gonna say 1999. That just seems like the right year for it.
Mm-hmm.
Where all I wanted for Christmas was Resident Evil 3 Nemesis,
Nice.
and
Very
I
nice.
did not get it. And not that I'm upset that I didn't get it. Like, it's not like something that harbors, but I didn't get the game. And I feel like if I had gotten the game, maybe I'd still feel the way I do about it. Because, like, I'm kind of ambivalent towards the Resident Evil series.
Okay.
It's one that,
So,
like,
like, did you check out 4 when it came out? Like, that was kind of the since Resident Evil 1, 4 was kind of the big splash after that.
Resident Evil 4 was the game of college for me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had it. There was, like, my friend Josh, back in Coventry, he played Resident Evil 4 all the time. Like on the level where, like, I'm at with Link to the Past. Like, he was so good at the game that in the mode where Ashley Williams is in a full suit of armor, he beat that game with just the knife. He's
Nice.
like, I did it this way because, first of all, Leon is dressed like a mafiosa in that, so he called it Leon the Professional mode, and he went from the start to the end.
Oh, that's so good. Josh, if you're listening, just know how good that was.
Yeah, it was excellent. And it was an awesome thing to watch him, like,
Yeah.
go through the game, like, and he knew it so well that, like, he could use the knife, which is not super strong or super fast, and do it. And he's like, but I do it like this because if she's not in the armor, like, I could be slashing something and something gets her, and it's just like, that's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want to have to, like, save her by using a gun. I
Yeah,
am
right,
challenging
right.
myself enough already by saying I'll only use the knife.
Yeah. Well, okay. So speaking of weird Resident Evil challenges, something that I so so essentially what's going down is the last W.S. Anderson, right? It was Paul W.S. Anderson that did the movies. I always get the two Pauls mixed up.
Yeah, it's W.S. Anderson, yeah.
Yeah. He's the one that's been doing the Resident Evil movies, and their last one came out this year, kind of to not much fanfare because honestly, the series has been dying off over time, and then on top of that, a bunch of weird stuff happened with this particular movie. But that's for another day. So I haven't seen it yet, which is actually weird because I've seen every other Resident Evil movie in theaters within like the first week or so that it's opened.
Well, also, I feel like
And I
that
haven't
one,
seen the latest one yet.
it wasn't in
So I
theaters
want to
that
watch it,
long.
but what I decided I wanted to do was really kind of get deep into some Resident Evil stuff first to really kind of, soak myself in it before I see this because it's going to be kind of momentous to see this last Resident Evil movie. They've been making them for the last 12 years of my life, man, and like the idea that this is going to be the last one that I see is actually kind of weirdly important to me, you know?
I can
Oh,
understand and appreciate that as a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise.
yeah. So like, so I've decided I wanted to go back through and play some of the games, not all of them, because to be honest, first of all, I don't have access to two, which is one of the hardest games in the world to actually get a hold of. There's a lot of, again, really weird stuff going on in the background with that game. It got completely remade in like the last like year before it came out. It was supposed to actually be what ended up becoming Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, was actually more closely related to what happened with 2. And then there was some stuff about going back to the mansion that might have been 2, and then they ended up completely scrapping that for what ended up being the introduction of Leon, and the police station and the city, and that whole thing. So I don't have any access to 2, so I'm not going to play that one probably. I am currently playing 1, which is the one that I'm in. 3 I like, but I have honestly only ever finished once because the Resident Evil games just get to be way too convoluted and long at some point for me. I have actually never completed 4. I'm going to try that this time.
Why are you going to do things like that? Why are you going to say things like that? Because now I also want to give 4 a chance.
See, the thing is 4 is supposed to be this really important change to the series and change to video games, the way that it changed things. I have never been able to pick that game up and play for more than 7 or 8 hours into it before giving up because I just can't. I am no good at working the control scheme in that game. And this is like, and this is kind of like a big deal with Resident Evil games because the big thing about Resident Evil is the way that they control for the first 3 games, were these like weird tank controls, right? And I always had a breeze with that, but people always complained about the way that they controlled in the first 3 games, so they changed it for 4. I seem to be the only person in the world that has a harder time controlling characters in 4 than anybody else does in the rest of the series. So I've never completed 4 because honestly, just because I always have a hard time. One of the earlier fights that you get into with I want to call him Pyramid Head because of the Silent Hill series, but that's not who I mean there. Leatherface there that comes in with the chainsaw every scene. I have a really hard time in like the second or third fight with him because I just can't control it well enough, and I just get so fed up with that fight that I never get past it. Right? So then I've never completed 4. Now Resident Evil 5, where they once again changed a bunch of the style and turned it just basically into a shooter game. I have played the hell out of that game. I have played that game like 3 or 4 times because it's super short and super fun, and there's things like collectibles and stuff in it. So I've gone back in and tried to get all the collectibles and tried to play with both characters and all this stuff. And then 6 is just a madhouse of insanity as far as I'm concerned. And then there's the episode stuff that they put out last year that I checked out, loved, but I never finished that one either. But I don't know if I'll go back to that one. So essentially, the big thing is for me to play through 1 again, look at 3, but I'm probably not going to play 3, and then 4 for sure finish. So those are the 2 things that I want to do before I watch the end of these games. And I encourage you to check out 4, man. Like I like at least try it. Like, what has kind of driven you away from those games? Like, is there anything in particular?
You mentioned it about why people like the game. The tank controls do not work for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because like games I liked growing up, like I loved Red Dead Redemption. That's what I'm going to say. Not Red Dead Redemption because that didn't exist. Red Dead Revolver
Yeah, the
was
first
a
one,
game
Red
that
Dead
I
Revolver
absolutely
before. Yeah.
loved, and it's a game that like some forgotten Saturday night. We're on Camp Westwood Road at one of our friends' houses, and we're playing Red Dead Revolver, and everybody is getting frustrated with the game. Everybody's like, "This is ridiculous. I don't understand what we're supposed to do." So the controller winds up in my hands, and I end up beating the game. And it's just like, I don't know what about the control scheme and just the way that, I mean, that's just like a basic shooter, right? But honestly, because you're using like oldie style weapons, a headshot is really the only guaranteed way to kill something. Otherwise, it's going to take 3, 4, 5 shots to take out an enemy. And I can do that. I could be moving and nail headshots. It's why I'm so excited for the new Red Dead Redemption sequel, because the gameplay in the Red Dead series is the pinnacle of shooting games for me. And then like maybe Uncharted a little bit, because Uncharted is another one where like if you can get headshots, that game is a breeze. And so
Yeah.
and that's just something that I excel at. But like I like the ability to move while I'm shooting, knowing full well that like it will be a detriment to my aiming and to the path of my projectiles. So Resident Evil, because they try to make it realistic, where like if you're shooting a gun, you're supposed to plant your feet and have a wide stance so that you know like your aim is straight and you know what you're going to shoot at. That kills the flow of the game for me.
Okay.
Especially because I've played Resident Evil 4. Like I said, it was all around me growing up. And I've never gotten past the village where you were just swarmed by zombies. Because I'm like, this is too much for me. Like, if it's me and one guy, I can stop, I can shoot, I can get the headshot, I can do the damage that is necessary. Bob's your uncle, will move on. But then when I'm just surrounded, I just want to get away from it. And that's not what the game wants you to do, and it's not the way that you're supposed to deal with that.
Yeah, I was going to say that if you don't like the tank controls, you should check out the re-release that they did for Resident Evil, because they actually took the tank controls out. But I think more than that, well, in addition to the tank controls, one of the things then that must not work for you is also the camera work, which they've been very open about. When they made that movie, they were emulating American horror films. So there's a lot of like weird angles and like and camera placements that don't make sense. You know, like you don't see the action well enough to really handle like the kind of shooting that you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I'll admit that, like, and I know that it's me, and I know that that's not what that game is about.
Well, right.
And that's why, like, Resident Evil 5, I enjoyed Resident Evil 5 more than the other ones. I played the crap out of the demo, and I think I own the game because it was for sale for $5 on PS3 once, but I've never played it because it's like I just can't get into the whole series at all. Like I like Dead Rising. Dead Rising is the game for me if we're talking Capcom and zombies.
Frank West all the way, man. I am here. I'm with you on that one. Well, so before we close up today, then I want to at least tell a little story about my attempting to go back to Resident Evil and playing it in a new way. Much like your friend there playing it with in a new way with just the knife and your escort there in armor. I decided I wanted to try and play through Resident Evil 1 in a way that I had never played through it before. And so when you first start the game, you get the choice of playing as either Jill or Chris. And I have actually never played through the game as Chris. I've always played as Jill Valentine. When I was a kid, I picked Jill just by the nature of I always seem to pick female characters and stuff right off the bat just to try games with. Whenever I create a Fallout character, that always seems to be the default that I go to. And I'm not sure why that is, but it's happened ever since I was a kid, right? And so I played through the game as Jill Valentine and struggled, but enjoyed myself. And I was going to go back and play as Chris, except that one of the things that my parents got for me when I was younger was a Resident Evil Prima guide because they always used to buy me guides for all the games I was playing. And I read in the guide reasons to not start with Chris. It wasn't don't play with him, but it was you may not want to start the game with Chris because you want to consider this, this, and this. So like things like his inventory is smaller. Things like there are certain moments that happen with Jill that it flesh out the story more. Like things like they were just like Chris will never learn this, Chris will never learn that, so you won't understand this. And it's just like, well then I don't really necessarily want to play with that character, right? So I played with Jill Valentine and have always played with her. And it's kind of panned out that Jill has kind of become like the breakout like star of that game, right? Chris is loved, but Jill is kind of one of those things that just shows up on everything, and she's like the go-to quote and all that sort of stuff. So I wanted to play through with him this time. One of the things that I forgot is that Jill Valentine starts that game with a gun. Chris does not.
Starts with a crossbow, right?
Chris starts with just a knife.
Oh my goodness.
And the thing is that there's a zombie that you meet very, very early on, and it is like the pinnacle zombie from that game, because it is like the first one that you come across, where you go through the dining room into a back hallway, and then you come upon your cameraman from your crew, and he is being munched on by a zombie, and they do a whole cutscene where the zombie's chewing on him and then steps up and looks at you, and then it cuts back to gameplay, and the angle is off, so you can't quite see the zombie. So you've got two options. You can either fire blankly at nothing. If you're Jill Valentine, you have a gun. You either fire blankly hoping that you hit the thing, or you run. As Chris, your option is to either stand there like an idiot with the knife out, and he's too far away for you to do anything about it, or run. And I've always, as Jill, just shot away, because with the gun in your hand, you can take it out pretty easily. And then what's cool about that is that you can get a VHS tape off of the body. You get you get your first zombie kill and her like reaction to it, and then like all that sort of stuff. So as Chris, I blindly start swinging away with this knife at nothing because it's too far away. And then by the time it gets into range where the knife is doing anything, it has its hands on you. And here's the thing about the knife in that game. It is also super not powerful in that game. Much like in Resident Evil 4, it takes a while to kill anybody with just the knife. And so I got chomped on instantly. And I never saved it, which in a Resident Evil game is the biggest sin you can commit. You run into the dining room, and right there is a typewriter and an ink ribbon, clearly meant for you to just use the ink ribbon the second you pick it up. Again, as Jill Valentine, I've never had to use it that early, so I've always been able to stash it, save it, and save it for a later save, which is important to me. And so I hadn't saved it, gotten through the first 10 minutes of cutscene, 5 minutes of gameplay, 5 minutes of me swiping at the zombie, and got killed. I lost 20 minutes of my life. And so I don't know how eager I am to go back to Resident Evil now, because that just like so upset me.
Yeah, experiences like that sully it. Like I said, like when I bought Resident Evil 4, I was excited to play it. And then I got to the village and I'm like, no, this is terrible. This scene is awful.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in 4 that I just never could get used to, man. Like I said, I never could win that fight. I always had trouble moving things like bookcases and stuff in the way, like you're supposed to block doors and stuff. But I could never remember to do it or could pull it off when I did. It's a hard one to play. And I mean, like, and that's the pride of people that play it, right? Like, it's part of the reason why people enjoy it so much, is they feel like when they've actually done something well in those games, they feel like they've really achieved something, right? And I totally get that, and I don't begrudge people the ability that can play that game. Like, it's a good game. I know it is. I recognize that. It's just that I just can't play it, right? And so at some point, I just have to admit to myself that I'm probably just never going to finish Resident Evil 4. But I'm going to give it a good old college try again this summer.
And because we are other hosts to one another, I have my PS3. It is set up. I will jump into Resident Evil 4 and give it more than a college try.
Excellent, man.
All
So
I
we'll
can,
report back, guys.
all I could tell you about Resident Evil 4, here is the thought and memory that jumps to mind every time that comes up. When I bought it for a couple of our friends who lived on campus because I was always driving by Walmart when I was coming into work. Coming into to work. School was work for me, let's be honest. So I bring it over. They plugged it into their PS2, and they boot it up. And Joe, you know who these people are, Joe and Pat. Joe proceeds to like spend 10 minutes using the 180-degree quick turn because he's like, if you don't know how to do it, you're done. So I gotta make sure I know how to do it. I gotta learn the muscle memory. You need to know how to do the 180-degree quick turn, or you're done in this game.
Oh my god!
So I sat and
he's
I
not
watched
necessarily
him
wrong
do
either.
it. No, I'm sure that he's right because then I watched him and Pat, his roommate, play through the game countless times. But I am a Super Mario World guy in college, and that's a story for another day. Because my Super Mario World stories, I don't want to say they're legendary, but they're pretty legendary.
Excellent, man.
All right. So thank you very much for coming into this episode of the Say Report. I am Devin Decker. You can find me on Twitter at Devin D. Decker.
Oh yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Siege versus the World. I forgot what we were doing for a second.
It's the outro, Siegen. It's the outro. It's the outro. It's the outro. So yeah, thanks very much for doing it. And without further ado, William, take it away.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Siegen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.